Hey, book besties. Look at me, my glasses. I didn't want to hold the microphone today. These are just for blue light. However, let's talk about everything I read in April, what I thought about it, if I think you should read it, just a review of everything, you know? These are all the physical books that I read, although a lot of them, as we've talked about, I do listen to the audio instead of the physical book. I'm just starting from the top. The Fire Beneath Azura. So this was a book that I found through a friend of a friend, kind of, by a indie author, and I thought it was really good. This is a very unique fantasy world where I originally thought we had different timelines that were going to come together, but it turns out we just have different POVs and it's all in the same world, but it's been kind of secluded. It kind of reminded me of like Wakanda within like the world. It has some pretty good representation of people, different genders, races, sexualities, which I also enjoy. And I think it has some pretty unique storyline. I am excited to read the second book. However, it did feel kind of like it just stopped in the middle. Like it could have been another chunk of book to really feel like there was a conclusion to this one. Love Requires Chocolate. I really had fun with this. This is a YA contemporary romance about a young high school senior who is Black, and she goes to Paris to do her senior project on Josephine Baker. And she needs a French tutor. And so, of course, the French tutor is a hot boy. And so his family owns a chocolate store. And so they just explore Paris together. He teaches her some French. She works on her project. It's really cute. And just like if you maybe just enjoy like YA, or you know like a young person in your life, I feel like this would be really good for like a high school girl to read, or boy. Fearless by Lauren Roberts. I originally gave this book like 3.5, maybe 3 stars, and then I like sat with it and I talked to some of my friends and we were talking about how frustrated we were, and I've reduced it to a 2. I did not enjoy this book and how it concluded the trilogy. So if you're not familiar, the first book is Powerless, and our main character Peyton is literally powerless in a world where a disease has basically like mutated people to have powers. And so she ends up in this Hunger Games ish competition, and she ends up not losing and kind of falling in love with the enforcer, who's one of the king's sons. But then in the second book, she's at the end, like she's supposed to get married to the other prince. And so this book was her like hiding, not hiding, sneaking around her fiance and then husband's back with his brother. She has to go through this whole other set of trials to like prove that she can be queen. Um, and then spoilers. Basically, she ends up marrying the guy Kit, who she finds out is her half brother. That the king was her father, and they find out also then that the guy that she actually likes, Kai, is not the king's son at all. So Kit has to die. So basically, and then she gets to be with the other guy, and he has this like full, basically incel level crash out about it, and I did not enjoy that. And then at the end, he's like in the afterlife, and if the next little novella is about that, I'm not reading it. The Rose Bargain, I thought was cute. This is like Bridgerton meets Fae, like not ACOTAR, but it's like Bridgerton meets any Fae fantasy that you've read, where we have a young woman who it's time for her to go out, find a husband, and it's kind of like what if the War of the Roses, neither of the two sides won, and a Fae queen won, and now she's in charge, and you make bargains with her. So it's pretty interesting. I was not expecting the twist at the end. I'm not going to spoil that, but I was not expecting it, and I definitely am interested to read the next book. I think this one could have been a little bit better, but I'm intrigued by the world, so I would read more. And it's more YA than adult, that's for sure. Heavenly Bodies. We talked about this. I literally read this at the very beginning of the month, and I don't remember what it's about. I know that the main character is like a star question mark. Like they're kind of literally star-crossed lovers, and is enemies to lovers, and she ends up in like the kingdom of darkness or light. I don't remember. One of them's dark, one of them light, and it has to do with like stars and gods and astrology. So I own the audiobook as well, so I'm probably going to re-listen to it because I just want to remember what it was about. And then getting into the books that I either read on my Kindle or just solely on audio, I read Sweet Obsession by Katie Robert. This is like the next book in her Dark Olympus series. I didn't like it as much as I've liked the previous books. This one is about Poseidon and Icarus, and it really felt like the relationship part was fine, but the like underlying plot about these books didn't feel like it moved at all. I arc read a couple books this month. A Fate Forged in Fire was really good. At first, I was like, wow, this feels like Game of Thrones, like House of the Dragon. I looked it up. It literally is House of the Dragon fanfic that got published. But I enjoyed it, so it's fine. The, again, like twist at the ending had me gasping. I was like, oh. So I'm going to be reading more of that. The only problem with arc reading is like I read it early, so I have to wait even longer. Obsessively Yours by Jamie Applegate Hunter. I really enjoyed the first book in this series, which was called Viciously Yours. And I think I explained this in my last weekly reading wrap up, but basically, like, the royals get a mate and they know their name and they have the same birthday, and that's how they kind of figure out who they are when they're like 13. But they can't leave their kingdom and like come into power till they're 25. And in this one, they're childhood friends, and he actually gets mated to like her twin sister, and so there's that kind of drama. And then because I had been holding on to it for a while, I read another book by that author called The Umber King, where this girl witnesses her sister's death, and she's been hunting down like the guy, and so she's kind of a serial killer, but like only of bad people, right? So she ends up in like purgatory, and that's where the Umber King is. You see where I'm going with this. They obviously fall in love. It was good. The ending is crazy. I need to read the next book immediately. His Juliet is a mafia romance, which is a very obvious play on like Romeo and Juliet. Is really cute. The FMC Juliet has a lot of anxiety and agoraphobia, and she has done some self harm. So check your trigger warnings before reading that one. It's pretty intense, but I really enjoy the like representation of different like physical and mental disabilities and challenges in these books. And also, I love a good mafia. Man, my only 5-star read of this month was Pucking Around, which is a polyamorous hockey romance. So if that tells you how this month went, I don't know. I am going to keep reading this series. I don't think they're all like why choose polyamorous, but it was really fun and I had a good time. And I think it tackled some things like in the subplot that was good. Okay. I also listened to a book that I'm going to say do not read. I gave it 2 stars, and I don't really know what the 2 stars are for. I guess because I just don't feel like it's a 0 or a 1. But Under the Oak Tree used to be a manga, and then the author took it from that and wrote a full length novel. This is volume 1, which I didn't realize meant that when it ended, it was just like halfway through whatever the story is, and there was like, it didn't feel like a stopping point. I was like, what the fuck is happening? Anyway, it also starts with a very intense consummation of marriage in a non consensual way. So I didn't love that. And I asked people who had like read the manga, I was like, is he like this much of a jerk in that? And they're like, oh no, he's fine. Like the dad's the real problem. I was like, no, he's definitely not in the right at the beginning. And then he gets like way too obsessed. And I just didn't enjoy it and it wasn't good. And then the last thing was Zodiac Academy The Awakening. My friend convinced me to read these because she read the first two and said they were super good. She hasn't been into reading for a while, so I feel like she was like, oh my god, it's amazing. I wasn't terrible. It's about these twins who, it kind of reminded me of The Cruel Prince, how it started, where like they're in the human world and then they go and they discover this like magic world. So they end up finding out that they're like fae, and they basically have to go to like fae college. It is very reminiscent of a certain magical school book series that I will not mention, but in like a more grown up way. There's some pretty serious themes, and it's like a bully romance. So these four heirs are just terrible to them. Um, I'll probably read more at some point, but I didn't love it. And I think that's everything I read this month. It should have been 13 books. So if you were keeping track, I hope you were. That was the 13 books I read this month. And then, real quick update on what I'm reading right now. I'm in the middle of 3 books. The first is a audio arc and like physical or ebook of Not Safe for Work by Nisha Tooley. This comes out in May 20th. And this is her first contemporary romance. She normally writes fantasy romance, which I love. I've loved all of her books. There's only one that I haven't like read yet. And this is like a workplace romance between a um, she's like 30 and she's a South Asian woman who is working in the engineering field, and she's like been passed over for all these things for white men, and then she gets chosen to go on this like leadership conference with the boss's son who's like her rivals to lovers, as we can guess. It's also set in Hawaii, so it's kind of getting me in the summer mood. And it has my favorite thing, which is just like forced proximity of people who don't like each other, but like the sexual tension. Ooh, it's so good. I'm listening to that. I'll honestly probably finish it today. And then I am starting King of Envy by Anna Huang. If you're new here, I love Anna Huang with my whole ass. I literally made sure to pre-order from an indie bookstore that's actually out in the suburbs because you get this fancy bookmark. And I was like, I need it because she's back in her morally gray era. The main character of this story, Vuk, is selectively mute. He can talk, but he mostly uses sign language and like types things out. And then the main character is his, or the female main character is his best friend's fiance, and she's a Ethiopian American model. So she's beautiful, banging, and he is like very dark, kind of like mafia vibes. I thought I had art with this, but I guess I was wrong. So I've been reading that, and then I'm reading the sequel to my like favorite book of last year, which was God and the Gumiho. The sequel is called God and the Guisen, which Gumiho is like a fox spirit, and Guisen is like a Korean ghost, like spirit type thing. I love these books so much. They're so funny. And so this one was kind of like set in like the 90s, and it was kind of a buddy cop mystery of sorts between him, the god, and then she's a fox spirit. And in this one, she has been reincarnated and now she's dead. And so they're in like the afterlife on this river boat, and there's been a murder. So it's a very like Murder on the Nile, but in the afterlife. And he is so funny. I love him so much. Like, just just what you need to know is that I love his name is, I'm gonna say it right for my husband, Sokka. Okay, I'm not very good at it. And then her name in this book was Hanny, and now she's Kisa. It's so good, and I love it so much. Anyway, that's everything I read in April, what I've started with in May, and I really need to do my bookshelf tour. So pester me in the comments. Anyway, love ya.